Hello and welcome to the Hookshot on the Miracle Sports Network. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Nate. Today we are talking about our mock lottery drafts for the upcoming NBA draft. Well, to start things off with the number one pick in the Timberwolves, I have them selecting Anthony Edwards from Georgia. He's a winger who's 19 years old. He's 6'5", 225 pounds, and has a 6'9" wingspan. The things I like about Edwards is I think he's without a doubt the best scorer in the draft. And in today's NBA, wing scores are probably the most important position. He contributes a lot on defense when he tries. He has a lot of issues with consistency, which is a big red flag about him. But when he's locked in, his on-ball defense is pretty great. And a lot of people say the Wolves don't have great defense. I don't think it's that big of an issue. They ranked number 19 last year in defensive efficiency. And I think some players like D'Angelo Russell are maybe a little underrated as to what people say they are. He averaged 19.1 points per game as a freshman, which led all eligible Division I freshmen. He's also a good rebounder, averages 5.2 rebounds per game. I think he's a good shooter. His three-point percentage wasn't necessarily the best, but he took a lot of shots. He has a good free throw percentage, so I think that's a good sign. And I think his personality is really good for being a star. When you listen to him talk and what he says, he's really, really good at identifying his own issues with his game. And I believe that he has the personality to become a star. He can become a number one scoring option on any team or a complementary piece. And do you have any thoughts on him?
Yeah, I also had Anthony Edwards number one, like you said. I think he can be a great scorer. He really has the size out on the wing. He's 225 pounds, and he can really just kind of bully his way to the basket or shoot it, like you said. He also has strong off-ball abilities when he doesn't have the ball of cutting to the basket. And I think having D'Angelo Russell as like the primary ball handler in Minnesota, D'Angelo can find Anthony cutting to the basket and lead to quite a few good points. He has a 6'9" wingspan, so on defense he's really long. He can bully some of the smaller players when he's guarding them, but also has the ability on a switch to hold his own against a post or someone bigger to him, and he can use those long arms to get those steals. He has some improving to do, like you said, with consistency and effort, but I think he acknowledges that his shooting percentages, I think, will go up as a shooter if he takes better shots. He didn't have a lot of talent around him at Georgia, so he found himself taking a lot of shots that weren't the best, or was taking deep threes or contested threes way early in the shot clock when that's not a shot you want to take. And I think going to the NBA, the coaches there can get that out of him, and he won't feel like he has to play hero ball as much um, when he's not the primary option in the NBA. But I think the Wolves are just trying to get the best. I mean, obviously, it's the best player available. They have the first pick, and Anthony Edwards has superstar potential. So why not take him over some of the other guys?
I also love his fit in Minnesota.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
really
Minnesota just needs talent, as a lot of these lottery teams do, and I think Edwards is the most talent. He has the most talent in the entire draft. He's the guy I would take number one. And there are some questions because you see him as a shooting guard. The Wolves have Malik Beasley, who was phenomenal ever since he got traded in the small
if
sample
they
size he
re-sign
played.
him.
Yeah, he's a restricted free agent, so if they re-sign him, he's a great shooter. I don't really see any issue with those two playing together with D'Angelo Russell if it comes to that. Um, I think Edwards can also be a nice secondary ball handler. He played point guard a lot for Georgia last season, which is something he was not comfortable doing. He's never really done that. He's always just been a scorer all throughout his career up until that point. So he talked about how it had maybe affected his game a little, where he was trying to think in like a point guard mentality more than just play how he was naturally able to play. But fitting to the Wolves system, I think he can hit his shots, and the Wolves shoot a lot of threes. I think he'll be able to get some threes and hit them. The Wolves also focus a lot on cutting. He didn't cut as much as I'd hoped to see him at Georgia, but he started doing it towards the end of the year. I think he has a lot of potential in the cutting just with just that pure strength, size, and athleticism he has. And with since was playing a point guard, he's a solid passer. I wouldn't say he's anything super fantastic, but he's a solid enough passer, which is another big thing in the Timberwolves system. And I think he'd be a fantastic fit with them.
Yeah, he seems to play his best when he's not like thinking through what's happening. If he just is instinctual, makes the right passes, makes the right drives, takes the right shot, he seems to be his best. And I think not relying on him as the primary ball handler will help him a lot with that, and you should see some good improvement in him.
Yep, I agree with that.
Okay, so pick number 2, I have James Wiseman. He's a center from Memphis. He's 19 years old. He stands at 7'1", 251 pounds, and a really great 7'6" wingspan. So there's not a lot of tape on Wiseman, which causes a lot of people to be nervous. He only played 3 games in Memphis. Due to some eligibility issues he had, he ended up just kind of leaving the team once he knew he was going to get suspended and it was going to be a problem. But watching him, some of his like college AU tape, and just the 3 games he played, he showed great athleticism. He can run the floor. He can be a lob threat and dunk the ball great. He is really skilled for a 7'1" guy, kind of not quite like Giannis, but I mean, he has ball handling ability to run the floor off a rebound and go coast to coast. He's agile enough to dribble around defenders, and then he uses his big body to finish inside, which should translate to the NBA well. I mean, that size is still really phenomenal there. He has shown some good jump shot potential, which as a stretch 5 and his lob threat, you can use him as like a pick and roll. He can also be a pick and pop and hit the 3 if he's open. And just kind of having that versatility in your offense, I think really helps whatever team he's on. And then he also just loves going for rebounds. He especially excelled on crashing the offensive glass, so he can get up there for the putbacks, and just use his long arms and jumping ability to get those down. On defense, he is an excellent shot blocker, especially on the weak side, help defender. His 7'6" wingspan, I mean, will pretty much be able to get everybody. He isn't the best on the perimeter, in my opinion. I think he needs a little bit more lateral quickness, and he gets a little block heavy, trying to chase blocks and kind of causes him to get beats, leave his guy open. Um, but yeah, so I have him going to the Warriors, which I mean, the Warriors obviously have Steph and Clay and Draymond, and they're really just in a win now. And I think Wiseman is more put together and ready for the NBA now than some of the other top guys, and that he'll be able to be put in immediately with Golden State and be a contributor to what they hope is a championship contending team. Nate, what do you think of that?
I disagree a bit on how ready he is. I think probably one of his more negative things is his potential readiness. And at the end of the day, it's just a bit of a question mark because we didn't see much from him at Memphis with only 3 games. But he has great potential, and I think it's a big pick for potential here, clearly. With that height and that wingspan, he has he has a lot of potential as a defender. He's one of the most athletic 7-footers I've ever seen, without a doubt. He's a great rebounder. He's a great lob threat. Could be a rim runner for them. He has a lot of question marks still, though, that he hasn't really been given a chance to get answered. I don't think he's a great playmaker. The shot isn't there. I see some potential where it's there, but I can't go out and say he's a shooter right now. I think his post skills are a little questionable on offense. Like your traditional posting up. He has great defensive potential. I think he's a good shot blocker, but just being a good shot blocker doesn't make you a great defender. I think he has all the tools without a doubt, but he needs to work, especially in his positioning on defense. And I don't I don't really think the Warriors are going to take Wiseman at the end of the day. I don't really think they're going to make this pick at all. They've mentioned that they're looking at trading it. I feel like they're going to trade it, and even if they stay put, I'm not sure if Wiseman is really the pick. I could see them taking maybe like a Denny Avdia or an Onyeka Okongwu over Wiseman. But if I'm making the pick, I'd probably go Wiseman off of that potential. If Wiseman hits that potential, I could see him maybe being like a 3-and-D center almost. Kind of you see guys like Devin Vassell later or like a Michael Bridges and the Suns where you have all these guys who are great at defense and three-point shooting, traditional 3-and-D, and Wiseman could be that. But in a 7'1", 7'6" wingspan center build, just that potential is something I don't want to pass up on.
Yeah, I mean, if he does go to Golden State, um, since they have such talent around him, with their 3 all-stars, if you think Draymond's gonna get back to his old form, he'll probably just play a very specific role of kinda like you said, mostly a rim roller, chasing the rebounds type guy that Golden State has kind of had struggles against. If you look at some of the teams that beat them, they use kind of their really talented centers, and Golden State hasn't been able to compete with that. Um, yeah, I mean, he won't be probably the absolute best person there right away, but I think he will be able to fit a very specific role at Golden State if they need him to, and will show great value that way.
Yeah, if he goes to Golden State, I'd probably anticipate as of now on Kevon Looney as starting at center, but he has a lot of injury concerns. It's always great to have this option, and Wiseman would become the future and add a really talented young prospect to a team that lacks some young prospects.
For sure. All right, ready to move on to pick 3?
Yep. So at pick 3 with the Hornets, I have them taking LaMelo Ball from the Illawarra Hawks of the NBL. He's 19 years old, just turned 19. He's 6'7", 181 pounds. He has a 6'10" wingspan. And I think LaMelo is probably the most polarizing player in this draft.
Definitely.
I feel like most of us have been watching LaMelo since he was a freshman in high school, just what he was able to do on that Chino Hills team, following him through his journey from that, getting 92 points in a game, shooting it from the half court line all the way to his Greece, the JBA, and now Australia. He's he has a lot of opinions of what's going to happen with him. A lot of people thought he wasn't an NBA prospect. He's just kind of this celebrity kid. And I think he went to Australia and really proved that he definitely is an NBA prospect. And he's a different player than he is or than he was in Greece and in high school and everything. And when I watch him on his old tape, I see a really cocky kid. There's some moments in Greece where he didn't care about anyone besides himself. He would make faces, he'd like flex at his opponents. And I think now looking at his development he's made in his last 2 years, you can really see at Australia, he's developed into a fantastic facilitator and playmaker. I think he steps into the league and is probably one of the best playmakers in the league with one of the highest IQs. Um, it's it's just really fascinating to look at him from that aspect. I think he has scoring potential. He kind of struggled at times. His percentages weren't great. He didn't shoot well from 3. He has a funky shot form. But I think with you see the potential he's or the progress he's made and the potential he has, I think there's a chance he can get into it. My question with that is he more like a playmaker who can score or a scorer who can play make? He I see some nice defensive play from him at times. He needs a lot more effort though, but I do see a few flashes where it could be good. He makes a lot of highlight plays. I think it's not quite as good if you're watching the full game. His shot selection wasn't great, which probably contributes to his bad numbers, but he also made some big shots, showing a lot of potential there. Do you have any thoughts on him?
Yeah, so I also have LaMelo Ball at 3 just because
Yep.
I think, Edwards, Wiseman, and Ball are the top 3 guys. I am not very high on Ball personally, though I don't really see him turning into, I mean, what you would hope out of a number 3 pick, like, multi-time all-star player. He does have good height and length, excellent height and length for a point guard. I mean, 6'7", 6'10" wingspan. He's a little on the small side, but he should be able to fill out as he gets a little older. Um, I guess some things he does well, like you said, is a great passer. He really has the ability to look off defenders, kind of like how I see a QB. Like a QB looks off the safety and throws it the opposite direction. He's able to do that as a defender. Has a great assist to turnover ratio in Australia. Very good IQ, can be a great pick and roll ball handler. So I see like his passing and his facilitation, like you said, really good. Um, I don't really have confidence in him shooting. I mean, he shot 27.9% from 3 with 6.6 attempts a game, and then only 38.9% field goal percentage, which that's bad if you're doing that in Australia to translate to the NBA. He doesn't come across as a great athlete to me. He's can be a little shifty, which can help him sometimes get around some people, but his defense, he pretty much has some ice instincts with his IQ to cut off some passes and go on the fast break transition. But I mean, his on ball defense was, I think, the bottom 1% in Australia, which, I mean, Australia is not a terrible league, but it's, I mean, nothing like the NBA. So he will
Oh,
be an extreme liability on the defensive end, at least initially, unless he is like Lonzo and becomes a great defender. But I mean, there's games where he went against RJ Hampton, who is another NBA draft prospect, and was beat pretty easily by RJ and looked not very good against him. Um, he could hopefully get better if his body fills out and learns to play with that size because he kind of tries to avoid contact and will rather take the fadeaway or some weird floater mid-ranger instead of being able to drive to the basket, which he should be able to do at 6'7". Um, I think he's only this high in people's heads because he's a name everybody's known for years, like you said, because of his brothers and his family and going overseas. And GMs aren't necessarily always the smartest people. So he has a lot of hype, in my opinion. And I like other point guards better than him, but I have him at number 3.
no, I'd probably agree that I have other point guards higher than him, but I think at the end of the day, he has the highest ceiling out of any point guards. I don't know if that's really debatable.
No, he
It's
definitely does. I mean,
and it's just a pure shot on him hitting that potential. At the
right.
very worst, it's a marketable name. Not really what you want to be drafting, just based on marketability, but going to maybe a smaller market like Charlotte could help bring some hype there, like you see Zion doing in New Orleans. And he definitely has talent, and I think Charlotte could just use more talent.
Yeah, you can ever since Kemba left, they've been a little lacking. So, okay. So for the fourth pick, I have Aaron Neesmith from Vanderbilt. He's 20 years old, 6'6", 213 pounds with a 6'10" wingspan. And he only played 14 games this year as a sophomore due to an injury, but he's fine to go for the draft. So I am really high on Aaron Neesmith. I I have the top 3 guys as those are the top 3 I think no matter what essentially is gonna go, and then the rest is kind of just, whatever the team thinks. But he's probably the best three-point shooter in this draft class. He shot 52.2% this year off 8 attempts a game, which is I mean, making over 50% of your shots in college is ridiculous, and he shoots a higher percentage on three-pointers than two-pointers. He's really good at being a spot-up shooter, or he can roll off a screen and drill the three. He has some ability of kind of driving to the basket as well, but doesn't quite have the ball handling or moves to get past people. He mostly will just explode, go downhill on a straight line, and try to go up for the layup. He also looks comfortable with being back to the basket, kind of posting up his guy, though again, doesn't really necessarily have the moves or anything to be great at it. He draws free throws, and his ability to move through space on transition, um, with his little explosiveness, he can be kind of a ball handler, ball on transition, and distributing the ball to other people. On defense, I wouldn't say it's a strong suit at all, but he is really good at staying engaged always. He kinda has a tendency to reach and go for the steal at times, but puts enough effort to get back on his guy that usually it's not too much of a liability, but he's solid team defender, knowing the right time to double team the ball handler or when to rotate or closing out the shooter on the corner, which if I mean, every team wants people that are great at doing that. Some things I think he needs to work on or aren't quite his strengths. He isn't great at making shots off the dribble, but like it looks good. So maybe just some more reps and getting a little more comfortable with that will show improvement for him. Like I said, he needs some more skills offensively, just some moves to get past people. He struggles when he's double teamed, which he kind of gets tunnel vision and doesn't exactly find where the people go. And if he's getting driven on the defensive end, he's not great at stopping the ball handler. He'll stay with them and try to disrupt the shot, but won't be one of those like strong people that stops the ball in their place. But I think, I mean, just alone having a guy shooting over 50% on three pointers with a lot of attempts is superstar potential. I mean, you see a lot of the guards and wings right now, um, just their ability to shoot the three from any range is a lot of the superstars we're looking at today. I see him maybe like Klay Thompson, where he's not gonna be a ball handler, but I mean Klay is one of the most dependable three-point shooters. He probably won't be as good defensively as Thompson, but kind of offensively, that type of role I think could really do him well. So I have him at pick 4 going to Chicago. I mean, Chicago's got the guard play with Levine, and I think they just need another wing to complement their team, and Nesmith can really do that for them. Thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely don't have Neesmith as high here, going pick 4. I have him much lower, but I think he is definitely the best shooter in the draft, and that's not just saying because he has a 52.2% 3-point percentage. I think everything he does is why he's the best shooter in the class. He's, as you said, his off-ball movement is great. Something I see, as you said, like Klay Thompson. I don't think it's a really fair comparison, but just the way that Klay Thompson is able to move off ball to get open and get his shot, I see Naismith being able to do something similar to that. His he has great size and strength to at the wing. I have no concerns there. He scored 23 points per game. He's definitely a great scorer. And I think one of the most impressive things about him is his shot selection, which I thought was pretty fantastic when you look at someone who scored 23 points per game. He has still a lot of questions, a lot of stuff you mentioned. I don't think he's very explosive as an athlete. He's a solid athlete, but just not explosive. He can get to the rim at times, but he's definitely not a great finisher around the rim. His defensive numbers look really bad, but they were better his freshman year. Apparently, he was also playing with an injury most of the season last year from what he was playing, which could have affected his defense. He seems to have the tools. I think his defense IQ is actually pretty decent. It's just he doesn't really end up performing necessarily. I think that will probably be better, but I can't really make a guarantee on it. I think he has a solid floor as just a terrific 3-point shooter, which is extremely valuable in today's NBA on any team. I I could see him fitting in Chicago. I think he would clearly start off the bench as a nice scorer, which can always be used. That, I don't know. That's mostly what I have there on
Yeah,
Neesmith.
I see him becoming, I think, a much better defender than you do. Like you said, he has good defensive IQ. I don't think he's gonna wow anybody with his defense, and, I mean, probably not get a lot of steals or blocks, but the kind of numberless defense, team defense, contesting shots, I think he will be above average, and with an NBA trending more towards offense and defense, I think just his offensive potential alone, with him showing he's not a bad defender, he's, I think, a really high pick in my opinion.
Okay, and at number 4 for the Bulls, I have them taking Denny Avdia. I think one of the big things the Bulls need is playmaking, and Avdia brings that. I wouldn't say he's going to be your primary ball handler, primary playmaker, but if you're going to have Kobe White and Zach LaVine as your backcourt going forward, both of those are score first guys, neither of which are great facilitators and playmakers. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a point down the road where they may have to pick between the two. I don't know who you'd pick between them then, but you never know. And I really like Avdia. I've been high on him for at least like well over a year at this point. I actually think there's a decent chance he might go number 1 as maybe a dark horse to Minnesota, but
Oh, wow.
I just I think he fits Minnesota's offense perfectly, but I think Chicago would be ecstatic to get him here. He's a 6'9" forward. He can play the 3 or the 4. I think he's a solid 4 in the modern NBA. I kind of have some questions of how well Markkanen and Carter will be able to play as a front court with the position that the typical 4 spot is going, more of like a small forward type role. When you have Lauri Markkanen, who is far from a terrific defender at 7 foot, along with Wendell Carter. I'll have to see how it works. Um, but Avdia, he's a lot of things he brings to the table. The playmaking is certainly great and something Chicago could benefit from, especially if it's at that 3 or the 4 spot. His basketball IQ is great, hence why he can make a lot of the plays he does. I think he shows a lot of promise as a scorer. His numbers weren't the best. He shot 29% from 3 and 55.6% from the free throw line in 26 games, which is far from promising. He has definitely shot better in other tournaments and leagues he's done, but in the Euro League, which is one of the toughest leagues in the world. His numbers dropped a bit. I do believe in his shot. I think he can hit the shots. With those numbers, it's tough to believe, especially that free throw percentage, but I've been watching him for a long time. I think he'll be able to shoot. I think he also has some underrated defense. No one really talks about his defense. I don't think it's anything great, but I think he shows a lot of promise at defense. His athleticism for his size is great. When you watch him, if you ever watch him in transition, just running down the court, his end-to-end speed is fantastic. He's very crafty. He has a great handle, which he can use to hit the open man, create for himself. I think he'll be able to create. He definitely needs to add strength. He definitely added some strength already during quarantine before his season resumed, but still, once he gets to an NBA program, I think that'll be fine. A big thing with him though is his consistency. He wasn't exactly the most consistent player. I think just I think that Chicago is a nice fitting place for him because he doesn't need to have the expectations to come in and just be like the best player in the team. You're gonna have Zach Levine probably leading the team in scoring. Kobe White's definitely going to get his fair share of shots this season. Markin will score with his 3-point shooting. He may not even start with Porter and Markkinen, but he'll have time to develop. I think he'll get more consistent as he adapts to the game. He's still really young. I think he has that mentality to become a star player. He has that drive to become a star player. I just don't really see a whole lot of downside with Chicago taking Denny Avdija at 4.
Yeah, I'm not as high on Denny as you are, and probably a lot of other people. I just don't really see it from him at all. He definitely has the potential there, but I think he's just kinda getting hype right now due to Doncic's breakout season and the way Luka plays. Went overseas as kind of a wing player, wasn't always the most polished, and then coming to the NBA and turning into a superstar. I think people are just trying to find the next Luka and kind of see Denny as being that potential. I I really don't have a lot of current strengths of his. He can knock down the 3 fairly decently right now. He looks comfortable doing that from most all levels, whether it's catch and shoot, off a screen, or he can kinda make his own shot. And he can capitalize on defenders who are slower than him and both with the ball and off ball. And he has some shiftiness in the post and a little bit of playmaking ability, though it's not consistent at all. He I think he tries to be kind of a lot what he's not. Like he thinks he's Kevin Love with the outlet passes off a defensive rebound, and oftentimes he's just missing his guy, throwing it out of bounds, the turnover. He I really don't think he has any ball handling at all. He in all of the film I watched, he always goes right, always dribbles with his right hand. Maybe he'll like dribble it back to his left, but he never drove with his left hand. Every time he tried, he had to pick up the ball immediately or lost the ball. And I think defenders were really picking up on that and would just close off his right side, and he would end up having to pass it or just take a really bad shot. Like you said, his percentages weren't good. His free throw percentage is pretty low, which doesn't really translate. I mean, people think a higher free throw percentage translates to more potential on a jump shot,
Mhm.
which having the bad free throw percentage doesn't really contribute to that. He I think he's like very amateur level ball handler right now. He will really struggle with that. I think he's a multi-year development piece. I think right now he could be an okay spot up 3-point shooter, but to defend on the wing, decent closeout rotation, decent defender. Um, but I think he's going to struggle a little bit with the better athletes in the NBA and will be more of a liability this season when he plays. But he showed great potential from his past 2 years. So, and has a good drive. He seems to, like you said, he wants to be a star and can probably have the drive and competitiveness to be a star. So I think he has great potential, but if I'm at the number 4, I think I would like to see someone with a much higher floor than what I think Denny provides. But I have him a little bit lower in my draft.
Yeah, that's definitely a fair point, but I I just see too much upside with him that I'd want to pass on him, and I think he'd be a great fit in Chicago. So I'm fine with taking him there.
Who do you have for the 5th pick?
Well, number 5, I have Isaac Okoro. He's a winger out of Auburn. He's 6'6", 225 pounds, has a 6'9" wingspan. He's only 19 years old. I've debated a lot of people for Cleveland. I had Devin Vassell at them for a while. But when I really look into Cleveland, I see that they are dead last in the league in defensive efficiency, and they desperately need some defense to try to fix their team. Another issue is I think they definitely lack someone who can truly play that 3 position. They have their backcourt experiment with Darius Garland and Colin Sexton. Didn't have a great first
Right.
season. I'm willing to give it another shot, see how it goes. Kevin Porter Jr. was a great find at pick 30 last year, but I I see Kevin Porter more as maybe a 2 than a 3. And then other guys they have there like Chetty Osman. I think he might be maybe more of a 4 in the modern NBA. And I just really see a lack of anyone on that roster who can contribute meaningfully at that 3 spot. And I think Okoro is that. The big thing of why Okoro fits with this Cavs is his defense. As I said, they were dead last in the league in defensive efficiency, and Okoro might just be the best defender in this draft class. He is very strong, has great size on the wing. He's extremely athletic. He's a leader. Coaches around the NCAA loved him for his leadership, and they really pointed out talking about him as only a freshman. He's a fantastic finisher. He's one of the best players in the entire draft around the net, factoring all these bigs and everything. His big weakness for sure is his shot. He's not a shooter at all. He had a 67.2% free throw percentage, which isn't very appealing. His shot looks odd. I would assume he'd probably completely recreate his shot when he gets to the league. I can't just go in and say he'll develop his shot. It could happen. But what I look at, even without the shot, is his effort he gives, the defense, the finishing at the rim. I really think he could be a big piece in Cleveland for those reasons of needing that 3 spot, needing that defense, and I think he's just a great fit for them. What are your opinions?
Yeah, like you said, Okoro really stands out because of his defense, and I think he steps in day one and is a good NBA defender, not just
Yeah,
above
I agree.
average, but like actually a good defender, which, yeah, Cleveland really needs more defense on their team. I mean, they're dead last. Um, so yeah, I have him. I'm not as high on him just because I think his offensive limitations and the way the game is going a little bit kind of, I don't know, I'd rather take someone who is good on both sides of the ball. But I mean, as the playoffs going on show that if there's people who are specifically really good at defense, they will get playing time even on a playoff NBA team.
Mhm.
So guys like Okoro are valuable to have on your team. I think his ceiling is much lower than some people, but his floor is a lot higher than others. Like, I think you see Okoro being very good role player in the NBA. I don't think I can quite see him as an all-star. I mean, he has the potential, but I think he grades out more as just a solid role player who can come in, play some defense, get some good finishing at the rim, isn't a strong shooter. So if he's surrounded by shooters and people that willing to rely on him doing that, I think that's good. Um, in Cleveland, if he starts, and Drummond doesn't really shoot the ball either. So I think the spacing could be a little questionable with everything that's going on there. But I mean, they have their guards, they have Kevin Love. They can probably make it work. Yeah, he really just needs to work on his shot. He isn't the most speed athletic, so getting around people on offense isn't the best, but he's very explosive and just his defense will for sure get him on teams, and I think he'll have a long NBA career no matter what happens to his offense as just kind of that role defensive guy. But if he can develop a shot, which I mean some people can, he can be an excellent 3 and D, like starter worthy 3 and D player for a solid team.
Yeah, I'd agree there. I think I think the spacing will be fine. Cleveland was the 19th best team in the league in three-point percentage last year. Kind of middle of the road. It's better than a lot of teams in this lottery, though. Sexton
Right.
really proved to be a good shooter last year. I think Garland will be better this year, and I think he's a great shooter. Kevin Love is definitely a great shooter. I think they have the pieces to surround him to be great there, and I think he does show a lot of offensive promise with just how great he is around the rim and his athleticism. But that shooting is definitely a big question, and that's probably what's going to make or break his potential in the league.
Right.
So, but
So, oh,
oh,
yeah, number 5, I had Devin Vassell going to Cleveland. You said you had him there for quite a while.
yep,
So, Vassell is from Florida State, 20 years old, plays on the wing. He's 6'6", 180 pounds with a 6'11" wingspan. So, kind of like Neesmith, Vassell is a very strong shooter. He had a very high three-point percentage at 41.5%. He's a great catch and shooter. He finishes well at the rim, but mostly all of his shots are just three-pointers, and he's not seen much as a playmaker on offense, but on defense, he has very quick hands. He has, I mean, the 6'11" wingspan on the wing is great size. He has great lateral quickness to get to the defender, and he can use his length to recover a lot. So if he gets beat, he can still reach his long arms out and put a hand in front of the shooter, disrupt the pass, just whatever he needs to do. He's solid, great team defense, and is a good blocker for the wing player, which will be very valuable there. Cons, I wasn't huge on his shot release. It seemed like very high above his head. But I mean, he's shooting well, so it's probably not the biggest deal. He needs to work more on shooting off the dribble instead of just only being a good catch and shooter, essentially. He lacks a little bit of shot creation. He seems to not be very confident in his own ball handling. He's not like a bad ball handler, but he seems to kind of struggle mentally with it, which obviously greatly will limit him when he's doing that. But I think he grades out as like a really stereotypical 3 and D right now. And I think he's a good fit in Cleveland. I mean, they have the 2 guards as ball handlers, so he will not need to be the ball handler. I think he can really just sit in the corner, drift on the outside. When other people drive, the ball goes into the post. He can sit there and knock down a lot of threes because, I mean, at Florida State, that's mostly what he was doing. He was taking very little twos, and I mean, he's a good defender. So I think that really, I mean, that's what every team wants, a guy who can shoot the three and play good team defense. So by him not being reliant as a primary ball handler, I think he's a perfect fit in so many teams. And so I have Cleveland taking him at 5. What do you think?
Yeah, as I said, I had him there for a while. I think it's a really similar session to Okoro, where the fit is he definitely contributes on defense, and without a doubt will help their defense hopefully get out of being dead last. He can shoot the three, which will help spacing. A lot of people have questions about his shot making ability. I could see him maybe developing that a little. I saw a few flashes of it, but he's not a great ball handler. He definitely needs to add strength to really, I think, hit his potential. But he has a very high motor. He has a big drive to play. His defense is pretty great. I think one of the bigger question marks with his defense is he tends to gamble on steals a bit too much.
Sure.
But I think he's has one of the highest floors in the draft. He's one of the best 3-and-D prospects we've seen in quite some time. I think he can pretty much fit in on any team. But at the end of the day, I went with Okoro over Vassell for the Cavs solely based on that defense. I think Okoro will bring more defense, and that's the big thing they need. But I wouldn't complain if I'm the Cavs getting Vassell 5 whatsoever.
So moving on to pick 6 is the Atlanta Hawks. And I have them taking Denny Advia, who we already talked about. I think Atlanta is a good team to take a chance on him because I think they really like the core they already have. I mean, they have 4 starters, I think, under the age of 22, and then Clint Capella. So I don't think they're necessarily looking for people who can replace the starting group that they have right now. So they'll probably lean more towards a potential pick, and Denny probably has one of the highest 2 or 3 potentials of any of the possible people in the draft. So why not take a chance, um, and potentially get a superstar out of it? So I have him going to the Hawks. We don't really need to talk about it more. Who do you
Yeah,
have
I
at
mean,
6th?
yeah, I have Tyrese Halliburton from Iowa State going to the Hawks. He's he played point guard at Iowa State. He's 20. He's 6'5", 7.5 wingspan, very long and lanky, 175 pounds. I think the big thing is he fits 2 glaring holes on the Hawks roster. He fits that backup point guard spot, and he can be a fit next to Trae Young. The backup point guard spot was rough. They traded for Jeff Teague. Jeff Teague's a free
Right.
agent. I don't know if he'll be back. I think you can have Tyrese Halliburton right off the gate. He can come in and be the backup to Trae Young, facilitating that backup offense, and I think he'll make that backup offense better. He, I think he can also be a fit next to Trae Young. He's a great playmaker, and that can alleviate some of the playmaking responsibilities off of Trae Young. He does a little more than a guy like Kevin Herter, who's pretty much just a shooter. Tyrese Halliburton himself was a great shooter. There's a lot of questions about his form. I don't really complain much about his form. The thing I'm more worried about with him is his consistency with it. I saw him shoot the ball off it a lot of different ways, but at the end of the day, he shot over 40% from 3, and if it's working, I'm not going to complain much. He's I said he's a great playmaker and shooter. He's pretty athletic. I think he's a really good defender, and that's definitely something needed next to Trae Young, who I think is probably one of the worst defenders in the league. And he's a leader, which He led that Iowa State team. He battled some injuries, but he was a leader and great character. I don't think you can ever complain about getting a guy who's a leader with good character. He definitely needs to add strength. I think they'll be fine. Just put him in an NBA weight room. That will get better. I I just don't really see a whole lot wrong with Halliburton here to the Hawks. There's a lot of options, but I really think he fills those needs. The Hawks were one of the worst defensive teams in the league as well. They were the 27th team, far from great. I think Halliburton has a lot of attributes he can add to that defense and get that up. I also like watching his a game that really stuck out for me is Alabama versus Kyra Lewis Jr. He just seemed to dominate him. He used his big frame. He really led that team, and that was a fantastic game for him. I just really like Halliburton. I think his fate's great. What do you think of him?
Yeah, I like Halliburton too. I had him a little bit lower, not much, but like you said, he was a good shooter. 41.9% from 3 in college this past season, and his shot looks a little weird, but like you said, I don't really have a concern with it. As long as it's working, it's working. I mostly have a lot of the improvements that you do. He needs to get stronger. I mean, he only shot 2 free throws per game, which as a starting best player on your team, you would think that would be higher. So he needs to get better at drawing contact. And I think he struggles a little bit when the defense is tight on him. He can't quite make his own shot, but he's a good facilitator. He can be a good passer on the pick and roll, either finding the rolling player or if there's a guy wide open in the corner. He is really good at releasing the ball quickly on a pass, so he just knows already where it's supposed to go and can whip that pass right over there without needing to stop and think about it. He loves attacking on the transition. He can make some shots off ball. So he has that potential there to play alongside Trae Young because there's no way the Hawks are moving Trae Young off of the
Yeah.
primary ball handler. Has a good assist to turnover ratio, has a quick release. So, like you said, starting out as the backup point guard, which is probably the Hawks' greatest need, and maybe potentially moving up, depending on how much he improves, to being alongside Trae Young. It does make sense here. That's not what I went with, but I like your pick.
With pick 7, the Detroit Pistons, I've been taking Killian Hayes. He's a 6'5" point guard. He played in Germany. He has a 6'8" wingspan, 216 pounds. He's only 19. I think Detroit is definitely one of the teams who needs to add talent in this draft. They have some talent. They could definitely add some more. I think Killian Hayes has a lot of potential and certainly adds talent. I don't think it's as much as
Right.
they need to take point guard specifically as a lot of people will say, but I think this is more just kind of a BPA with a guy who I think has a decent enough floor, but certainly a high ceiling. He can come in the team and be a successor to Derrick Rose, who doesn't really fit their timeline. He could become an asset down the road, maybe. But Killian Hayes has a lot of things I like. I think he's a great passer. He has a lot of scoring potential. He was a great shooter this season. In 10 games played, he shot 39% from three and had a 90.9% from free throw, which is definitely very appealing to show his potential as a shooter.
Yeah, especially, I mean, someone that young
Oh
already
yeah.
doing that overseas.
I,
I mean,
I
that free throw really shows he just like has that potential there, and that 3 pointer seems to already be there.
yeah, I think he has a lot of maturity as well as a player. I see a lot of stuff in him that I don't see in a lot of other players his age. Uh, his downsides, though, I think he causes too many turnovers. He had 3.3 turnovers per game. It's not great. Hopefully, something he can cut down on. He's very left handed dominant. He rarely uses his right hand, and if he's really going to become a great scoring option, he's going to have to use that right hand more. He he is also just he'll need time to transition and playing in Germany, but I think he's probably best player available right now, and there's so much to like that I'd love taking Killian Hayes if I'm the Pistons. Who do you have?
Well, I'll talk about Killian Hayes for a little bit.
No, okay, that's
Um,
fine.
I mostly have kind of what you said. I mean, his shot percentages are there. He makes some real good flashy passes, kind of one-handed, just whip them across the court. He has a strong step back move already. He's a controlled dribbler. I really see him, like you said, needing to improve, and not just being one-handed. I mean, even when he shoots a layup, even if he's coming in on the right side, which you would supposed to be go up with your right hand, he will switch it back to his left. So he needs to get more comfortable with that. But right now, it's probably a backup with the Pistons. I I like a guard pick for them. I mean, I had someone else, but Killian Hayes is definitely a good option. But yeah, I like him better than LaMelo. So
Okay.
it's not a bad pick. But at 7 to the Pistons, I have Tyrese Maxey. Now, some people might see this as a little bit of a reach, but he's a point guard from Kentucky. He's also 19. He's a little smaller than Killian Hayes, 6'3", 200 pounds with a 6'6" wingspan. I have Tyrese as one of my top guards. I see him being able to be a primary ball handler guard, which he wasn't always necessarily in Kentucky, but I think he will develop that, and I see him more as a potential pick. Like, I see him potentially being like a Damian Lillard type of kind of bullies his way, has some ridiculous range, just pulls up off the dribble. I mean, he was already doing some of that in Kentucky. Not, I mean, obviously not as good as Damian Lillard or with great high percentages, but I think he already has the confidence and the ability to get there. So I see as more of a potential pick for Pistons. They don't really seem to have a great direction right now. I mean, they've got some older guys playing very key roles on their team,
Yeah.
on a team that's not very good, which isn't really necessarily what you want. So I think they've got a few years until they're competitive and taking a guy like Tyrese. But to dive deeper on him, he was a good spot up shooter and also showed shooting ability off the dribble. He finishes strong at the rim. He's very aggressive, can draw those fouls. He also has a floater game and can finish with both hands. He really likes to use his speed and quickness, whether it's driving on people or getting through post players or breaking on the transition. He's a very high energy guy and a guy people want to play with. On defense, he has strong footwork and moving around. He isn't the longest player, but he uses what he has to contest shots on people he's defending. And he really doesn't foul very frequently. I think he had less than 2 fouls a game for a guy playing several minutes. Cons, he didn't have a high three-point percentage, but I mean, he was kind of trying to take some of those Damian Lillard shots, just like way deep pull up, early shot clock. So I think he's actually a better shooter than what his percentage shows. He needs to become a little better passer and playmaker. He kind of just likes to take it himself a lot. And his shooting, I think, could be fixed a little bit, which would also help with his percentages. He kind of shoots the ball out from him rather than shooting it up and getting that arc. But I think those are all pretty fixable things. I also just like guys from Kentucky. I think they develop strongly. I mean, look what Jamal Murray is doing right now, another
Yeah.
guard from Kentucky. And I think Tyrese Maxey just looks the part to me of being an elite potential top 10 player in the league. I mean, he's a long ways to go, but I'm not taking it for the Pistons. So that's who I have there at pick 7.
Yeah, I definitely don't hate the fit of Tyrese Maxey. I agree. I think he's very underrated. I just struggle with finding a fit for him. Is the big thing. He's only 6'3", and I think he's kind of in an awkward position, kind of similar to how I see Colin Sexton. Sexton's only 6'1", so Maxey's a little taller, but like at his size, you would want him to be more traditionally your point guard, but he's not really a point guard. I don't think he has a lot of those skills unless he's going to be more of a scorer. So he kind of feels more of like a two guard, which can work in today's league, but I think that's where he falls a lot to me. But I think there's a lot of underrated aspects about his game. I think he's a good shooter. He shot under 30% from three at college, which is not great, but he had an 83% free throw percentage. So it shows there's a solid amount of potential that can get better.
Right.
He His field goal percentage was better at 42.7%. That could still always be higher, but I really like his scoring potential. I think he can come in and score right away. And I think the most underrated aspect of his game is his defense. I absolutely love watching Maxi on defense. His his guard defense is so fun to watch. He makes big plays on defense, and he has a very high motor. He's always going to bring that energy. I think he will always have a role on a team, and he's just a great pick for anyone. He has great finishing abilities too. I think he can shoot. He I really think he'll be a great shooter with that. He needs to get more consistent. That's I think is a big key for him. If he
Right.
comes into league and comes off the bench, develops a bit, I think they'll get better. He's also, as I mentioned a little earlier, he's not a great passer. He I don't see him being much of a facilitator with that passing. He's more of a score first guy, but I it, I really would not mind betting on him with just how much he shows on offense and defense already at a young age.
I think he shows he has all the pieces and the potential of scoring
Yeah.
anywhere at any time while also playing the defense. So it's just a matter of coaching it out of him to be more consistent and kind of like take the next step in all of those aspects.
Yeah, I think he adds a lot of talent to Detroit. As I mentioned, they need talent.
Right. Yeah,
I,
they're lacking.
I mean, a concern for me is I think he could play next to Derrick Rose. I think Derrick Rose can be a point guard, but Derrick Rose also is a bit of a scorer. He's changed his game up a bit, but he still scores a solid amount. But they also have Bruce Brown, who's not the biggest player. He plays the two position for them. He's a great defender. I just I don't think it would be bad. It's just there's already some players there, but if he's at the top of their board, that's a fine pick with me.
All right. Moving on to pick 8, then we have the New York Knicks. And the Knicks, I think, just don't really have much talent wise. I mean, sure, they have RJ Barrett, who they just drafted. Maybe a couple other guys could pull up something in the future, but I think they really are just looking to add a best player available, probably. And for that, I have Tyrese Halliburton from Ohio State. Like I said earlier, I really liked him. I think he just has a lot of ability with his playmaking and his shots that he adds talent and will immediately improve the Knicks. So I think that's who they're
I
taking at 8.
I love the fit of Halliburton to the Knicks. I think he could come in and be a one or a two guard. A lot of
Right.
question about the Knicks is RJ Hampton or RJ Barrett more of a two or a three? That's a little yet to be seen. I think a high point of taking Halliburton would be he could come in and be that point guard that they desperately need, but also they could eventually move him to the two and maybe take more of a traditional, like another traditional smaller point guard and Halliburton would add nice spacing, which you need shooters around Barrett, and he's a good playmaker. Adds defense. I think he's a great pick.
Yeah, I think Bear's flexible enough that they can move him at the 3, no
Yeah,
problem.
I agree.
They just need talent, so
Yeah, and if I'm the Knicks, they really need a point guard. I You can't necessarily draft by need, but there's a lot of point guards in this draft.
right.
I Frank Ntilikina is, I mean, he's coming along, but I don't think you can count on him as being your franchise point guard at this point. Maybe he can surprise you. Alfred Payton was decent for them, but he's not the future.
No, those are all kind of role players slash backup
Yeah,
point guards.
and if I'm the Knicks at this range, I would absolutely love it if Killian Hayes or Tyrese Halliburton fell to this pick. But in my mock draft, I had them going 6 and 7, so they're not available, which leaves me in a position where I could take. There's plenty of players I could take. I'd still take a point guard. It might be considered maybe a bit of a reach. There's a lot of guys though, like Kyra Lewis. I think Cole Anthony is a wild card, but he might be decent here. But I had them going Aaron Neesmith, who I still think it feels a little high for him. It's not quite fourth overall like you had, but as I said earlier, he's just the best shooter in the draft, and they could use shooting. They were the 27th team in the league in team 3-point percentage, very low. That could be improved. And if you want RJ Barrett to succeed as best as he can, surround him with shooters. And I think both Neesmith and Barrett could play the 2 or the 3, so you can just, those are your two wingers. You can see who you want. And I think just the abilities he adds in his off ball movement with that shot selection he has, his size and strength, I really think he could be a good fit in New York. And if I'm looking at maybe a potential fit, if Halliburton and Hayes are off the board, Neesmith is the guy I'd probably go with there.
I mean, I love Neesmith. I had him.
Yeah.
I mean, number 4, and I think he's. I mean, if I was a team, I would probably draft him in the top 3. So,
Some
I mean,
high
yeah,
praise.
I love him at the Knicks. I think he can be a plug and play player on pretty much any team. So, if he's there at 8, I think is an excellent pick for the Knicks.
Yep. Ready to move on to number 9?
Yes. Who do you have?
Okay, so at number 9, the Washington Wizards, I'm taking Onyeka Okongwu. I I think the Wizards are ecstatic Okongwu's here, and they can't run this pick in fast enough. I don't know if Okongwu will be here. I honestly think he could. If the Warriors make the pick at 2, I think he could go to the Warriors at 2. The Warriors don't really seem to like Wiseman much, and it seems like they may even like Okongwu more. It could
But
also
that could
be
also just
smoke.
be draft talk,
Yeah,
right?
you never
So,
know, but still, I think Okongwu is more draft ready than Wiseman. Wiseman has more potential, but it's a similar situation like the Cavs. The Wizards were the 29th best team in defensive efficiency, so pretty much dead last. They could use all the defensive help they can get. John Wall coming back. He's missed 2 years. It sounds like he's doing well. He hopefully, no matter what, should definitely improve that defense, especially with, I think their point guard position was lacking a lot of defense this year. But
yeah.
looking down low, uh, they don't have many great defenders. Thomas Bryant is looking like a nice player. He can hit the shot a bit, maybe decent shot blocker, but not a great defender. Mo Wagner can definitely shoot, but he's not a defender. Davis Bertans, if they end up bringing him back, is a fantastic shooter, but also not really much of a defender. Rui Hachimura's, he's kind of more that new hybrid 3-4 going to the league. He's not really that paint protector though, and I think Onyeka Okongwu can come in and be that paint protector. I think he'd be a great fit there. I'd I think he's without a doubt the best defensive big in this draft. His interior defense and just shot blocking is on a completely different level of anyone else, I think. He has tremendous athleticism, which helps him be the player he is. He's 6'9". He has nice height. He's a little maybe more in the line of some of the smaller ball modern center position. He's a fantastic rebounder, which never hurts. He's a great roller on the pick and roll, which when John Wall comes back, that might be his bread and butter. He's not really much of a playmaker, but if you have Wall and Beal, I don't know how big of an issue that is. His shooting's a big question mark. You really would like to see him shoot in the modern NBA. That's not really his thing. It may develop. I wouldn't necessarily count on it. He needs to add
No.
strength. I think adding strength would just make him an even better defender, and I have belief that he can in an NBA strength program. I just really think it's a great fit. He can rotate in with their rotation of bigs they have and really bring a new element that none of them really show, and certainly help their defense next year.
Yeah, I think Okongwu is a great player. He is a little awkward because he plays like a traditional post player. Really doesn't have that shot at all. But he's only 6'9", so a little on the small side probably for that position. But just his ability to shot block, like you said, and be kind of that defensive leader and staple on your team. I
Yep.
think I guess it depends on what Washington does with Bryant or if they move Hachimura around on quite exactly he would play. Um, like you said, he is fairly NBA ready, it seems like. So maybe he would move into the starting lineup there for Washington. I think Washington, if they can stay healthy, could potentially be somewhat of a surprise team. I mean, they're in the East, a little bit weaker conference. And Bradley Beal showed his superstar ability this year. And John Wall, who knows what you're going to get from him, but he's at least a guy who in the past has played really well. So yeah, I don't hate this pick. I have the Wizards taking someone different and a Okongwu going just a couple picks later. But at the place where they're at, he's definitely not a bad selection.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
So at number 9, I have the Wizards actually taking Killian Hayes. Now, I struggled with this pick a little bit because Killian Hayes is a point guard and they have John Wall is under contract for a few years. But I think I could see Washington trying to move on from him maybe, try to dish him off in a trade. I mean, I believe he has a max, if not just
Yeah,
shy of the max.
it's a super max. It's very expensive.
Yeah. So, and I think with him just basically missing 2 years, you don't really know what you're gonna get. Slash, I mean, some people are already calling John Wall the worst contract in the NBA. So, but I think John Wall's a name enough that some team's gonna try to would be interested in him maybe. They'd probably have to give up some picks, but so I have them taking Killian Hayes here, either as the backup under John Wall, who can develop for a couple years, or I mean, John Wall is very injury prone. Just a decent second option to have in case that happens. And I think someone that could pair up with Beal pretty well. And who knows? I mean, I think John Wall is really the X factor on this team, and he could really make or break how well they are.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think uh, with as many point guards in this draft, it's never a bad idea to go for a point guard with them.
Right.
You still have no idea what John Wall is going to come back and do. I don't really see him dropping off and being a below average starter. I think at the very least he'll do that. His defense has always been great. I and I think that'll help that. But Killian Hayes, you could definitely say is the best player available at this. I thought he was probably BPA
Sure.
at 7, at 9. He can develop behind John Wall, learn from him. and as you said, fill in for if John Wall goes down, which could always happen. I think he could also play maybe a little bit of two guard if Beal went down too. There's it's just another great prospect to add, and I can't complain there at all.
Okay, so number 10 with the Phoenix Suns, the kind of bubble favorite team going 8-0, but just missing the playoffs barely. So I think they will be an exciting team. They surely have a lot of hype around them entering next season, and it's just a little interesting, I think, on what they are going to do. But here I have Isaac Okoro. You had him much higher. Have him dropping just because I think teams will be a little worried about his offensive potential, maybe. But I like him with the Suns. I mean, the Suns in the bubble showed that they can play great defense, but I don't know if I buy the bubble to the real full NBA season completely. So I don't think they will need to rely on him to score. I mean, they definitely have other scoring options. I mean, Devin Booker being the main one. DeAndre Ayton can improve. So I think he can bring that very consistent defense, whether the Suns have it or not. Um, Probably coming off the bench for them. I think he's just a best player available in this situation because I think their hope is they can carry the bubble to next season and be competing for hosting a playoff round in the next season. So just taking best player available, Isaac Okoro, he can already play in the NBA and be, I think, a really quality role player today. So I've been going to the Suns at 10.
Yeah, I agree with the best player available, and with that, I'm taking Devin Vassell, who I have as the best player available in my draft right now. I I think the bubble, as you're talking about, is maybe a little overrated.
Right.
Looking at their 8-0 stretch, I don't want to take much away because still 8-0 is great, but I think in 6 out of those 8 games, that one of the team's best players in each of those games or multiple were out. They didn't really play the full strength teams, but it certainly showed a lot of promise. And and I think Devin Vassell is just a nice pick the as just to come in and be a nice 3-and-D guy for them. I think he's really similar to another 3-and-D guy they have, Michael Bridges, who really showed off in the bubble with Oubre out. But I think Vassell would be a solid fit there. They were the 27th best team in the league in bench scoring. They could always use scoring, and Vassell, I think, could score. At the very least, he'll score some points shooting. As mentioned earlier, he's a good defender, high motor. He has a very high floor. I think that it just adds to the floor of that team and it helps them nudge their way from a bottom team to starting to compete for the playoffs like they were showing this year. Initially, I had them taking Tyrese Maxey because I look at their guard depth and it was atrocious. I mean, Ricky Rubio was a nice point guard. I think Javon
Right.
Carter's a little underrated. But outside of that, Elia Kobo is really, really bad. They Ty Jerome was very disappointing as rookie. He battled some injuries. Shooting guard spot, they really just don't have a lot. And but in the bubble, I mean, Javon Carter was decent. Cameron Payne was really solid in the bubble, and I think at the very least, Payne deserves another shot. I still have a lot of questions about that backcourt, but I feel a little better based off of what I saw in the bubble and have some hope there. Vassell, I think, could come in and play that two guard spot or maybe that three. I think their best lineup they can put out forward is going to be Rubio at the one, Booker at the two, um, Bridges at the three, Oubre at the four, and Ayton at the five. I think that's their best lineup. And
I would agree. Yeah.
and if that's how it goes, I think Vassell can come in and be a great just a great winger wherever he plays. It seems like a really Phoenix Suns pick as of late, where they took Bridges, they took Cam Johnson, probably the best shooter in the draft last season, which seemed like a big stretch at the time, but that certainly seems to be looking great for them. And at the very least, I think it could always just maybe be a potential piece to move if he shows out and they want to get aggressive and make moves. It opens up other players. I think it also maybe open up Oubre, who's been looking in trade talks if they want to clear cap. But I think it's just the best player available, and I think both players would be great. They're similar in many ways.
Yeah, Vassell at the very least for them would be a great option off the bench. Come in, get you 9, 10, 12 points.
Yeah.
Which I mean, every team just needs a couple people like that coming off the bench. So
Yep.
and he plays great defense on top of it. So yeah, that's also a good pick.
Yeah. So moving on to number 11 with the Spurs, I have them taking Obi Toppin. When I look at the Spurs roster, I just really think they need to draft a big of some sorts. They have so many guards who do a lot of things, and Murray and White and Forbes, and they have a lot of really nice wingers that have potential, like Lonnie Walker and Keldon Johnson. And I look at their depth in the bigs, and it's like Luka Šamanić, who's a prospect. LaMarcus Aldridge is solid, but he's getting old. Jakob Poeltl's a free agent. I just really think they need to add a big, and I think they would jump on the chance to get Obi Toppin here as that big. He can come in and play the 4 spot for them. He's very athletic and explosive. He's a great playmaker. He's a scorer. He can shoot. He's efficient. I just really don't see a whole lot of downside with him on offense. But to counter that, he's probably one of the worst defensive players in the draft.
Yeah.
And I really think you need to have a team that can cover him up in defense a bit. And I think as a team, San Antonio has some good pieces. I don't know. It's more just a BPA at that point where you're taking Toppin. I think Toppin could come in. I could almost even see him coming in averaging 20 as a rookie. It's just he has so
He
many
does,
skills on offense.
definitely.
Yeah, he has so many skills just on offense that I would definitely take him. Do you have any
Yeah,
thoughts on Toppin?
I thought about Obi Toppin at this pick as well. Really thinking that post, I mean, especially with LaMarcus out in the bubble, the Spurs were playing like guards at the 4. So they really need some help there. And I think it's tough because the Spurs are kind of just starting to come down all off of this multi-decade run of being a good team. And I think they kind of just need a little more, few more pieces in as part of their team. So yeah, I like Obi Toppin. Offense, he can pretty much do everything. I see him as like an athletic Blake Griffin who can shoot better. He has that like dunk package and those flashy dunks and can do the pick and roll like Blake Griffin. But I mean, on my notes next to defensive pros, I have nothing written. I think
Yeah.
he struggles at the perimeter. Will get beat by traditional big men. Doesn't have defensive footwork. Doesn't box out for rebounds. But I mean, the Spurs with Popovich are always a good coach defensive team, so he won't be relied on as the strong defender there. But yeah, I mean, I've seen his name being thrown around at multiple places as the rookie of the year. I mean, he's just coming off national player of the year in college. So, but he's 22. Probably, I don't think he shows much improvement in any places. I mean, he'll probably get better in the NBA, but like, I don't see him developing anything more offensively really that's new or necessarily really becoming a strong defender. Maybe if he goes to the Spurs, Popovich can coach him out of that. But so instead of Obi Toppin, I have Okongwu. Um, I mean, they're looking for a post player. We both agree Okongwu's better.
Yeah.
I just had him falling due to fits and a little bit of places. So I think he's another good pick on the Spurs. They're kind of I think people see them as more of like an old school team, and Okongwu is kind of an old school player, um, where he can just go to work in the post, both offensively and defensively, and doesn't really need to have the jump shots. But I don't know. The Spurs, I think, are a tricky team. I don't think they're going to get better over time with the players they have. So they kind of just need to retool and get some pieces. And Okongwu being 3 years younger than Obi, I think he's the better option if you have both of them.
Yeah, I would take a Congo over top in here if he's available, but he's not on my board. But
Sure.
with it's still just I think they really need to add big players. I think a lot of people would agree with that, and
Right.
it's probably just BPA of whoever that best big player on your board is, and I think here's Obi Toppin for me on your list. I'd agree with Kongwu.
Yeah. So staying with Obi Toppin, I've been going just the pick later at number 12 to the Kings. Um, like we just said, his offensive ability is really strong as the big. Definitely needs improvement on defense, but I think the Kings already like their wing players, whether there's been debate on if they're actually going to keep um, De'Aaron Fox now that his contract is coming up. But I mean, they have solid people all around with De'Aaron Fox and Bogdanovich and Buddy Hield that they need just another post player. I mean, they have the Elitsa, who I don't know if I don't really see him as like a quality starter. Um, so moving on to pick 14 for the Celtics. I mean, the Celtics are a quality team. They're still in the playoffs. Um, they're probably not really looking for many starters currently. Um, I think they're probably just going to go best player available. So I have them taking Kira Lewis Jr., the guard from Alabama, who's 19, 6'3", 165 pounds, with a 6'5" wingspan. And Kira Lewis Jr. is part of this guard class that's really good. Where there's just a lot of top guys there. So him is he is really shifty and moving around. I mean, he's quite a bit smaller guy, um, but he kind of uses like a Euro step or something to get around defenders and post players to get to the rim. He is maybe the fastest person in the draft. He is really good at getting the ball, especially in transition, and then just taking off or and using his speed and quickness to blow past people, get right to the rim, or he can also kind of stop and go where he kind of blasts forward, uses a little hesitation, gets the defender off balance, and then blows past him again. Um, he will just come in and be kind of how not quite how Westbrook uses it, where Westbrook's kind of a one-man fast break, but, um, more like De'Aaron Fox. So De'Aaron Fox is probably the fastest person in the league. Um,
Yeah.
he really just can just beat everybody to the basket. Um, on defense, he really relies on his athleticism, to jumping in the passing lanes to get the steals, and then immediately choose defense into offense. He's got pretty good on-ball defense, and for only being 6'3" and a small guy, he had a good amount of rebounds. So I think he's a solid player. Um, he is really small, and teams will try to switch on him, so he's guarding a larger guy, and he'll get beat a lot. At the rim, he I think is just out of control a lot, just always going fast, fast, fast. When there's times where instead of going to the basket, he should do a floater or shoot a mid range. He kind of gets a little wild with that. Um, he needs to improve his ball handle a little bit, especially if he's going to be a lead guard. But at being 19, he already has 2 years starting experience in the SEC. I mean, a solid conference. There's a lot of guys from SEC going, and I think that just says a lot about him. He's already coming into the experience. He came into college really young. So for the Celtics that already have a really strong team, I think just adding someone like that off your bench, that's kind of just that energy guy, come in, get a few points, um, will really be useful to them.
Yeah, I had Lewis to them in my initial mock, and I I think he'd be a solid fit. As mentioned, he's fast. He's the fastest player in the draft. I think he shows a lot of tools with shot creation. He's got some solid dribble, and he makes a lot of shots. His
He
shooting's
really
great.
does.
He was a 40% 3-point shooter. I think that I believe that will translate well to the league. He's a really great playmaker as well, and I think his on-ball defense is great as well. He uses that speed and athleticism, and he really sticks on ball. I really don't see a whole lot of downsides with Lewis. I think he's a bit raw. He needs some time to develop, though, to
Right.
really get that. Like, as I was mentioning with Halliburton, that one game where he played Tyrese Halliburton definitely got the better of him there. But he has
But I think he
experience.
could come in with just his raw athleticism and
Yeah,
contribute something at least off the bench. So
I yeah, I think he's a great pick there. I think a big thing is he's had strength. Like you mentioned something like De'Aaron Fox. Wow, I think that's just a lazy comparison just based off of speed. Just you look at De'Aaron Fox though, and De'Aaron Fox is 185 pounds. Lewis only
right, he's a
has
lot
165.
bigger.
There's a 20-pound difference there. He definitely needs to add weight, and that'll be a big thing. He really loves the Euro step. He uses it a lot, and he's good at it. And he's great in transition with his speed. I think there's a lot to like there. He's a great prospect. But I had them taking Jalen Smith, the big out of Maryland, with that pick. I As I mentioned, I had Lewis initially, but I decided to go Smith because I look at the Celtics and I think their biggest need is at the center position. They have just a whole slew of guys they threw out there. They got Aeneas Cantor, who doesn't contribute anything on the defensive end, but he's decent on offense. He's a solid rebounder.
Right.
Vincent Poirier, he's a rotation piece. Robert Williams is a good shot blocker, but he's still really raw. Um, and then they have Daniel Tice, who I think is probably their best center right now. He can do a lot. He can defend and shoot, and I think Jalen Smith is more in that mold. I think he can come in and make an impact on the Celtics team off the bench. He's 6'10", 225 pounds, and is almost a 7'2" wingspan. He's only 20. He has 2 years starting at Maryland. He also has some flexibility where he can maybe play the 4. I really like him because I think he can protect the rim. He shows some solid things on defense as well, just outside of that. He's a great rebounder. He This past season especially, he started showing some potential as a shooter. He I think just off the top of my head, he was shooting around like 36 to 38% on a little under 3 attempts per game. Could be wrong there, but it was definitely more than he was shooting his freshman year. He has some solid athleticism. It's nothing like super flashy, but it's definitely great for his size. I think he
right?
definitely needs to add some strength. He's got some, but I think adding strength would do a lot for him. I think his biggest takeaways, though, I don't think his post offense is all that great. I don't think it's horrendous,
No,
but there's definitely a lot to work on there. He's not really a playmaker. I don't think that's his role, but that he's not a great playmaker. And I think he has a lot of work he can do on defense with his footwork, especially and being in the right position. That'll help him be a great defender. But I think he's just a nice young guy who can come in and compete for minutes at that center position on a really deep Celtics team that doesn't have a lot of minutes to give. And when you look at them with 3 first round picks, I don't really even think they have 3 open roster spots. That he's definitely a guy who can make the team and contribute right away.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with a lot you said there. I mean, Jalen Smith's a guy I've seen personally play at least twice, and he definitely is more of like a modern big man stretch player. Um, he really gets beat up um, in the post, just from the games I've seen against. I mean, going against Daniel Tuber out of Minnesota, who is a much stronger post player and also NBA prospect coming later in the draft. Ochoa just looks so much better. And but Jalen Smith, he can hit that three, like you said, at a good percentage, and is actually a strong shot blocker. So he can grade well as like a weak side defender, and has shown some ability to guard in space a little bit. Um, he doesn't wow you with athleticism, but he definitely is athletic for being 6'10". So yeah, he's also not a bad pick for the Celtics, who really are just, I mean, looking for good players at this point to make their team better.
Yeah.
But so that finishes up our draft lottery. You just want to run through your picks again, and I'll go through mine just as a summary.
Yep. So at 1, I have the Timberwolves taking Anthony Edwards out of Georgia. At 2, I have the Warriors taking James Wiseman out of Memphis. At 3, I have the Hornets taking LaMelo Ball out of Australia. At 4, I have the Bulls taking Deni Avdija out of Israel. At 5, I have the Cavs taking Isaac Okoro out of Auburn. At 6, I have the Hawks taking Tyrese Halliburton from Iowa State. At 7, I have the Pistons taking Killian Hayes from Germany. At 8, I have the Knicks taking Aaron Nesmith out of Vanderbilt. At 9, I have the Wizards taking Onyeka Okongwu out of USC. At 10, I have the Suns taking Devin Vassell from Florida State. At 11, I have the Spurs taking Obi Toppin from Dayton. At 12, I have the Kings taking Sadiq Bey out of Villanova. At 13, I have the Pelicans taking Alexej Pokusevski from Greece. And at 14, I have the Celtics taking Jalen Smith from Maryland.
And then my mock draft, I have top three is the same. So the Wolves taking Anthony Edwards, the Warriors taking James Wiseman, and the Hornets taking LaMelo Ball. And then at 4, I have Aaron Nesmith from Vanderbilt going to the Bulls. At 5, I have the Cavaliers taking Devin Vassell from Florida State. Pick 6 to the Hawks, I have Deni Avdija. And pick 7 to the Pistons, I have Tyrese Maxey from Kentucky. Pick 8, I have the Knicks taking Tyrese Halliburton from Iowa State. Pick 9, I have the Wizards taking Killian Hayes, playing in Germany. Pick 10, I have the Suns taking Isaac Okoro from Auburn. Pick 11, I have the Spurs taking Onyeka Okongwu from USC. At 12, I have the Kings taking Obi Toppin from Dayton. Pick 5, Sadiq Bey from Villanova to the Pelicans. And lastly, the Celtics taking Kira Lewis Jr. from Bama at pick 14.
Well, that round out this podcast. So thanks for listening this week, and please rate us 5 stars on your podcast platform. This helps other listeners find our podcast. Next week, we'll talk about the rest of the first round, picks 15 through 30.
And then you can find us on Twitter or Instagram at the Hookshot Podcast and on Facebook at the Hookshot Podcast as well. And you can check out our website at anchor.fm/thehookshot. And we will see you next week.